Hello friends, and welcome to Poketto Booksy. Today, we're going to have a chat about Dan Heath's book, Upstream. Maxwell was a wise, albeit somewhat troubled man. Living in a small town, his life was much like anyone else's, you see. Wake up in the morning, off to the office, work all day, come home tired, and fall asleep. But there was always one thing that troubled him. By the end of each month, he would run out of money. The pressure at work was rising, and his health was slowly getting worse. He often thought about making a change, but he only ever acted after things had already gone wrong. One day, Maxwell's old school friend Ashton, who had now become a social thinker, came to visit him. As soon as they sat down, Maxwell let out all his frustration. "Everything is going wrong, man," he said. "By the end of the month, I'm broke. My boss keeps yelling. There's tension in the family. My health, you can see it for yourself. How long can I keep dealing with this?" Ashton smiled and said, "You're always in firefighting mode. Have you ever thought about where all these problems begin?" Maxwell was a bit taken aback. "I say, what exactly do you mean?" he inquired. Ashton replied, "What I'm getting at is you only seem to take action after a problem's already struck. But have you ever considered, what if we could spot these problems early, solve them before they even begin, eh?" Maxwell nodded slowly. "But how is that even possible, old boy?" he asked. "That's what they call upstream thinking," Ashton said. "It means going to the very root cause. Instead of simply fixing the damage, you'd prevent the problem from happening in the first place, you see." Then, Ashton told him a simple story. Imagine you're standing by a river and you see children drowning. You jump in and start saving them, one by one. At the end of the day, you're exhausted but proud. You saved 10 children, but 5, sadly, still drowned. Then someone comes to you and says, "Why don't we go upstream and see why these children are falling into the river?" Now, just imagine going upstream and discovering there's a broken bridge from where the children are slipping. If you were to fix that bridge, perhaps no child would fall into the river at all. That, my friend, is what upstream thinking truly is. Maxwell began to understand. He did. So, in my own life, the funds running dry is a bit of a pickle. But the real root of it is, I'm spending without a proper budget, and when those nasty emergencies rear their heads, I end up panicking and regretting it something fierce. Ashton gave a nod. Precisely. As it stands, you're spending, then taking out loans, then feeling all anxious. That's all downstream action, that is. But if you cast your mind upstream, planning your income and expenses well in advance, you can dodge a fair bit of that. You can. Now, Maxwell started coming up with some more examples. Like with my health, I only think about stepping into the gym when I start huffing and puffing just trying to breathe. But if I take regular walks and mind my diet from the get-go, maybe I won't get to such a sorry state. Ashton smiled gently. Now you're starting to get the hang of it. Think about your work, too. There must be a deeper reason behind all that stress. Could be poor time management. Or perhaps just expecting too much, eh? Maxwell was starting to shift his entire mindset. He really was. He began to re-examine his daily habits. Before, he'd kick off his day by scrolling endlessly on his phone. Now, he's using that time to jot down thoughts in a journal, keeping his daily purpose crystal clear. He used to make every choice on a whim. Now he pauses, reflects, and asks himself, will this help me steer clear of trouble down the road, or is it merely a fleeting bit of relief? One day, he found himself in a pinch, having to borrow a bit of money to cover his younger brother's school fees. And then he paused, asking himself, now, did I plan for this? The answer, of course, was no. So, he resolved that from that moment forward, 10% of each month's salary would be allocated to an education and emergency fund. At work, one of his projects unfortunately didn't quite pan out, and he received a scolding from his boss. However, instead of allowing himself to be consumed by guilt as he once might have. He sought out the underlying cause, a lack of clarity and communication. He then began to work proactively, holding weekly meetings, addressing any doubts early on, and submitting reports well in advance. Consequently, the very same boss who had previously criticized him praised him the following month. Maxwell's life was gradually transforming. Now, instead of simply reacting in panic when problems arose, he had begun to anticipate them. Much like how it's far better to set off early than to find oneself stuck in traffic, many of life's challenges can often be avoided through early consideration. Maxwell had now started to ask himself one crucial question in every situation. Is this perhaps a signal of a larger problem? Can I address it now before it leads to future difficulties? Slowly, the tension within his home began to ease. His esteem at work grew, and, most importantly, his confidence flourished. He had ceased to live life in a state of reaction. He had begun to respond with awareness and preparation. One evening, while sitting in the park, Maxwell pondered, "I say, why are people perpetually so stressed?" He wanted to share what he had learned with others. So, he started a small community group where people met weekly to discuss the root causes of their problems and find real solutions. On a board, he had written one rather powerful line: "Don't fight the problem, kill it before it's even born." Maxwell had now become the sort of person who didn't just jump in to save drowning kids. He went upstream and fixed the broken bridge. That's the true power of upstream thinking. When we only focus on symptoms, we get temporary relief. But when we understand the root cause and prepare ahead of time, we not only improve our own lives, but can help others too. Think about it. What's that one problem around you that keeps coming back again and again? Have you ever tried to find its root cause? If yes, then nothing can stop you from becoming an upstream thinker like Maxwell. His life now had a different kind of peace. Right then, if you're finding these summaries useful, do know that every thought you share, every bit of feedback, truly makes a difference. It helps us chart our course, ensures we're heading in the right direction. Now, let's get back to the crux of the matter. Maxwell was a changed man, no longer one to be easily rattled. He observed the world with a newfound awareness, you see. This upstream thinking had reshaped his very existence. Not only could he foresee potential troubles, but he'd also begun guiding his friends, his community, to do the same. He demonstrated that by focusing on the root, the fundamental cause, we can avert even the most significant crises. But, as life would have it, the path is never without its twists and turns. Every transformation encounters hurdles, and Maxwell was certainly no exception. One day, Maxwell decided to visit Shepard, an old school chum. Shepard, a teacher at the local government school, often shared his work experiences with Maxwell. On this particular day, Shepard seemed unusually distressed. Maxwell inquired, "What's amiss, old boy? You look rather burdened." Shepard sighed deeply. "Where does one even begin? The students, they simply aren't engaged in the classroom. Our results deteriorate year after year, and the principal, well, he lays the blame squarely on us teachers, claiming we're not performing our duties adequately." Maxwell inquired, "Then why don't you all come together and forge a plan to elevate the students' performance?" Shepard, with a tone of melancholy, replied, "Honestly, it seems that no one even cares. Everyone just says, it's our job to impart knowledge. If the children choose not to study, how can we be held accountable?" Maxwell fell silent. He realized this was the precise obstacle that so often impedes upstream thinking, a distinct lack of ownership. Maxwell asserted, "See, Shepard, the core issue isn't merely that the children aren't studying. No, the real issue is no one's even accepting that it is a problem. As long as we reside in this state of problem blindness, no change can ever truly materialize." Shepard looking perplexed, questioned. Problem blindness? Maxwell elucidated. Cadfire. Problem blindness signifies that something becomes so commonplace, so ingrained, that we cease to perceive it as a problem. Like when you say, the children don't study, and everyone simply thinks, well, that's just the way it is. But has anyone paused to consider that perhaps the system itself is flawed? Perhaps it's the teaching method. Perhaps it's the home environment of the children. Shepard paused, contemplating. Well, left single quotation mark. So we just accept it as it is, and no one questions it? Maxwell nodded. Precisely. And when there are no questions, no solutions will ever emerge. That is the most telling sign of problem blindness. Shepard, now quite serious, asked, let's assume we acknowledge the problem, but who steps up to take ownership? No one wishes to bear the responsibility. Maxwell nodded. That's the second key obstacle, a lack of ownership. Everyone believes, it's not my concern. And when everyone shares that perspective, no one takes any action. Maxwell offered another illustration. Picture a neighborhood strewn with refuse. No one bothers to clear it up. Everyone declares that is the municipality's responsibility. But if each individual simply did their part, perhaps by not littering or picking up a bit of trash, we might not require a cleanup crew at all. But as no one takes ownership, the problem nearly escalates. Shepard said, frustrated. And furthermore, with such a workload, attendance, syllabus, examinations reports, we hardly find time to pause and reflect on how to address these problems. Maxwell regarded him intently. And that is the third considerable obstacle. Tunneling. This tunnel is too close to several millions of stars. We become so engrossed in short-term tasks that we are unable to contemplate the long-term. It's akin to walking through a tunnel. One cannot foresee what lies ahead. Now, Shepard could completely relate to it. He did. So, I wonder, how does one get out of this tunnel, eh? I really don't have the time, and there's so much pressure, you see. Maxwell responded. You're not alone in this. Not at all. Everyone finds themselves stuck in this loop, I assure you. But just ask yourself this one small question. Can I take just one small step to break free from this loop? For example, what if you spent just 1 hour a week teaching students differently, using storytelling, role-play, real-life examples? Wouldn't that make a difference, do you think? Shepard nodded slowly. Yes, I suppose I could do that. And maybe it would inspire other teachers as well. Maxwell smiled gently. That's precisely how it starts. One small action that moves you from downstream to upstream. And that can only happen when you overcome those 3 barriers. First, acknowledge the problem. Second, take responsibility. And third, step out of the tunnel and think long-term, my friend. Some weeks later, Maxwell met Shepard once more. This time, there was a faint smile gracing Shepard's face. He shared that he had initiated an open discussion day in his classroom, where students could converse freely about their learning issues. He had also experimented with some innovative teaching methods, short videos, group activities, and story-based learning. Initially, there was resistance, but gradually, students began to engage. 2 other teachers joined him in this method, and the most rewarding aspect, Shepard no longer felt merely like a teacher. He felt like a system changer. Maxwell remarked, "You see, Shepard, upstream thinking isn't solely for senior leaders or officers. It's a mindset. If a teacher, an office worker, or even a parent embraces this mindset, choosing to be proactive rather than reactive, a considerable amount can be transformed." Shepard shook his hand and said, "Now I comprehend. Solving problems doesn't commence with tools. It commences with mindset." Maxwell now fully realized that the most substantial barriers to upstream thinking often reside within ourselves. When we avert our eyes, when we assert, it's not my responsibility, or when we convince ourselves that we're too occupied to contemplate, that's when we remain ensnared. But the instant we breach those three barriers, problem blindness, lack of ownership, and tunneling, we begin to perceive everything with greater clarity. That's when even ordinary individuals can instigate extraordinary change. Well, Maxwell's story had now started changing other people's stories, hadn't it? He had learned that blaming the system wouldn't fix anything, you see. If we truly want to stop a problem from repeating, we have to go to its root. And the path to the root, it begins when we accept the problem, take responsibility, and start thinking long-term. Maxwell wasn't just improving his own life. He was now helping others open their eyes too. Perhaps that's what defines a true upstream warrior. Shepard now felt much more confident and purposeful. The small change he had made at school was starting to show results. Some teachers had started adopting his methods, and even students who once seemed completely disinterested were now asking questions in class. Maxwell and Shepard began meeting every week, sharing ideas, lessons, and even failures. One evening, Maxwell began telling Shepard a fascinating real-life story. He said, "Do you know about something that happened in Chicago's public schools? It deeply impacted me." Shepard took a sip of tea and said, eagerly, "No, do tell." Maxwell began. There was a time when Chicago's public schools were facing a massive problem. Dropout rates were extremely high. Graduation rate was only 53%. That means out of every 100 students, 47 were dropping out. Shepard was shocked. That high? But why? Maxwell replied, "That's just it, you see. No one, really, was asking why students were dropping out. Everyone had simply accepted it as normal, you know. A classic case of problem blindness, really. No one thought there might be something they could do to stop it." Maxwell continued. Then, a team decided to adopt an upstream approach. They asked, what if we could predict in advance which students were at risk of dropping out? Then, perhaps, we could intervene early so they wouldn't leave school at all. Shepard leaned in, intrigued. Maxwell said, "They created an early warning system, a system that analyzed attendance, behavior, and grades. Through this, they could identify which ninth-grade students were at risk." Shepard inquired, "You mean students who were frequently absent, consistently had low grades, or exhibited poor behavior?" Maxwell nodded. "Precisely. They treated these three things, attendance, behavior, and course performance, as key indicators. ABC. Any student weak in these areas was considered high risk. Then, they began focused interventions for these students. If someone was frequently absent, they'd receive calls and home visits from counselors. If someone had behavior issues, they were offered mentoring. If someone was falling behind in grades, they received tutoring support. It was, really, like giving each student personal attention." Shepard remarked, "Good heavens. So, rather than merely pushing the students to simply chase higher marks, they addressed the underlying issues." Maxwell offered a smile. "Precisely. And would you believe what transpired? In a mere handful of years, their graduation rates soared from a mere 53% to a remarkable 78%. Shepard, quite taken aback, responded, "Such a dramatic improvement? Merely by identifying the problem in its infancy?" Maxwell responded, "That's the sheer force of upstream thinking. They came to understand that dropping out is but a consequence, yet behind that consequence lie numerous early indicators. Instead of turning a blind eye to those indicators, they meticulously tracked them, sought to comprehend them, and acted decisively upon them." Shepard paused, taking a deep breath, and said, "So, might we embark on a similar endeavor within our school as well?" Maxwell replied instantly, "Assuredly. Consider this. Are there pupils within your school who exhibit a pattern of absenteeism? Or those who remain conspicuously silent during lessons? Or perhaps those who respond with a degree of discourtesy? All of these serve in this state are secrets with such honest addiction and content. Shepard, now in full brainstorming mode, stated, "We might devise a straightforward tracking sheet. Each instructor meticulously records weekly attendance, conduct, and examination results. Subsequently, we conduct monthly analysis to pinpoint those students who consistently underperform." Maxwell added, "And subsequently, engage in one-on-one discussions with those pupils. Converse with them. Endeavor to understand their circumstances. Certain individuals may necessitate emotional support, while others may require academic assistance. And, if deemed necessary, we enlist the involvement of their parents as well." Shepard, quite enthusiastically, put forth, "We could embark upon a pilot project, perhaps commencing in the 9th or 10th grade, and then steadily broaden its scope to encompass other classes." Maxwell encouragingly added, "And, most crucially, ensure the students perceive they are not isolated in this. When one senses genuine care from others, they, almost instinctively, embrace greater responsibility." In the days that followed, Shepard broached the subject with his principal. Surprisingly, the principal found merit in the idea. Thus, a small team, comprising 4 teachers, was assembled, and they initiated a program christened Student Success Watch. They devised an ABC report for each student, meticulously tracking attendance, behavior, and course performance. Initially, there was resistance. Some teachers questioned, "Who, pray tell, shall undertake all this additional labor?" Others remarked, "We are not counselors after all." But Shepard elucidated that this extended beyond merely individual students. It was about elevating the school's overall performance. 3 months hence, during the initial evaluation, astonishment rippled through everyone. Among the students flagged as high risk, a remarkable 70% had demonstrated tangible improvement in their grades. Attendance had improved noticeably, and many had begun to modify their behavior too. The principal, during a staff meeting, declared, "I never foresaw we could discern students' challenges this early on. This transcends mere teaching. It embodies leadership." A surge of confidence, indeed, washed over Shepard. He called Maxwell, relaying, "Brother, that story of yours, that tale of the Chicago schools, it's now quite remarkably materializing in my own school." Maxwell responded, with a knowing tone, "That, my friend, is precisely the essence of upstream thinking. When we anticipate, when we think ahead, we possess the power to reshape the trajectory of a problem. Rather than merely extinguishing fires, we mend the pipeline, ensuring the fire never ignites in the first place." Shepard, not one to rest on his laurels, then introduced another initiative, a peer buddy system. High-performing students, paragons of academic excellence, were paired with those teetering on the edge, within the risk zone. This, too, yielded remarkable results. For now, struggling students possessed a guiding friend, a beacon of support. Shepard had, by now, come to a profound realization. True leadership transcends mere instruction. It encompasses envisioning a child's future and diligently working towards it. And that becomes attainable only when we embrace an upstream mindset, a proactive approach to nurturing potential. Some months later, Shepard and Maxwell graced an education reform seminar. There, Shepard shared his odyssey, how a teacher, once feeling helpless, had metamorphosed into a system thinker. Following his address, the applause resonated, ceaseless and resounding. Maxwell, with a smile of pride, stated, "You're not merely a teacher any longer. You're a changemaker, a catalyst for progress." Shepard replied, "And you're my upstream friend indeed." This story teaches us that if a massive system such as Chicago's schools can change, well then, why not our smaller schools too? The difference lies in the mindset, reactive or proactive. When we accept the problem, take ownership, and plan for the long term, the results go both deep and wide. Because, in the end, the question isn't, what's the problem? No, The real question is, can we see it before it happens? Shepard's life was now full of new energy, you see. His work was making a real difference in the school. The ABC tracker, attendance, behavior, and courses, was beginning to show its impact. Students were now more interested in learning. Teachers were more involved. And, most importantly, the word dropout was being heard less and less. But as with every change, there came a moment when things started to stall. In the third-month report, they noticed that some students who had been improving were suddenly falling behind once more. The report said, "Sudden decline in grades, despite prior improvement." Shepard became concerned, naturally. He spoke with teachers and students, but couldn't quite figure out what had changed. That evening, while chatting with Maxwell, he shared his concern. Maxwell listened most carefully, and then he said, "You're doing wonderfully, truly. But perhaps now you might ask yourself, which numbers are you focusing upon?" Shepard seemed puzzled. "I'm not sure I follow," Maxwell explained. "Organizations often measure things that have already occurred, such as final exam scores, dropout rates, or indeed disciplinary actions. These are all lagging indicators, you see." Shepard nodded slowly. "Yes, we also pay attention only after a student fails or misses too many classes, it's true," Maxwell said. "And that's precisely the problem. Lagging indicators only tell you that the damage has already been done, hasn't it? If you desire real change, you have to watch for the signals that come before the problem arises. These are called leading indicators." Shepard thought for a moment. "So, missing attendance. That's a leading indicator then?" Maxwell replied, "Precisely. If a student is absent twice a week, that's not merely a holiday. It's a signal that something's amiss. It could be something at home, in school, or within themselves. That's your chance to intervene, don't you see?" Maxwell offered another example from real life. Indeed, even in hospitals, they used to only observe how many patients ended up in intensive care. But subsequently, they discovered that the true warning signs emerged far earlier, such as missed medications or neglected routine checkups. So now, should a patient miss 2 appointments, they receive a call, they're encouraged to return for care before it escalates into an emergency. Shepard responded, "So, we ought not to await failure in final examinations. If a student performs poorly, even on the initial internal test, or neglects homework, we must be vigilant." Maxwell affirmed, "Precisely, and marks are not invariably the most reliable indicator. Occasionally, it's emotional. If a child who was once cheerful suddenly grows quiet, avoids group activities, that too is a signal." At that moment, Shepard's mind was flooded with ideas. The very next day, he convened a meeting and shared this concept with the teachers. Some were perplexed, yet many concurred. Together, they established a new early signal tracker. This tracker encompassed subtle behavioral patterns that were often overlooked, such as weekly homework submissions, group participation, extracurricular involvement, sudden mood shifts, and frequent health complaints. One teacher remarked, "We've always focused solely on grades and attendance, but now I perceive there are deeper messages and small signs," Shepard said. "If we catch the right signals at the right time, perhaps we can stop a student from failing before it even occurs." That very first month, something quite shocking happened. A girl named Taylor, usually so punctual, had been arriving late for 2 weeks straight. No one took it seriously. Her grades were still good. But the early signal tracker flagged it. Shepard spoke with Taylor personally. She broke down and confessed. There was tension at home. Her parents were constantly fighting. She was slipping into depression. Shepard immediately connected her with the school counselor and kept regular follow-ups. Over time, Taylor started healing. Her punctuality returned. Her performance improved. And most importantly, she no longer felt alone. That one moment made the whole team realize, had they not caught that early signal, they would have never known. And that's the power of upstream thinking. It's not about waiting for someone to drown before jumping in. It's about walking upstream and fixing the broken bridge before anyone falls in. Today, shuttered school has become a model. Teachers now don't just focus on lessons. They focus on patterns, on signals, on feelings. Every month, they sit down not just to check marks, but to track moments that could shape a student's life. Maxwell once told Shepard, "What we measure, we improve. If we only measure damage, we stay stuck in damage control. But if we measure signals, well, we start preventing damage." Shepard now trains new teachers in his district, you see. The Student Success Watch and Early Signal Tracker are being adopted in other schools as well. His vision is simple. Don't just teach, protect, prepare, and prevent. At a recent conference, when Shepard was introduced, people didn't clap for his results. No, they clapped for his mindset, because his work had reminded everyone that the best leaders aren't the ones who save the day after the fire. They're the ones who stop the fire from ever starting. The journey that started with a small thought shared in a park had now turned into a movement. And all of it began the day Maxwell asked, "Why do we always wait for things to go wrong with a good spirit and safety?" So now, it's your turn to ask yourself, what is that one problem that keeps repeating in your life? Have you ever asked what's causing it? Have you ever tried to stop it before it starts? Because if you can see it, if you can name it, if you can take ownership of it, then you too can become an upstream warrior.